Shiro, a typical Japanese office worker, endured a monotonous existence, repeating the same daily grind, yet secretly longed for something beyond his mundane reality. Each day began with a bus ride to his job, followed by long hours until late evening, after which he had retreat to his modest apartment to pass the remaining hours. His evenings were often spent consuming mindless online content, but his deep desire for a more fulfilling life was unexpectedly granted when he awoke one night without an internal interruption. Amidst the blankness, his vision sharpened, revealing himself before a cup of Edon with white wine, who astonishingly declared himself to be the Almighty. Not being a naive teenager, Shiro remained invasive, questioning his whereabouts. The divine K-pop figure then disclosed that Shiro had, in fact, passed away. He was now in a transitional state, a limbo where his essence was on the verge of vanishing permanently, but the deity offered him a choice to be transported to an entirely new, fantasy realm named Medios, where he could begin anew as any person he desired. This proposition instantly captivated Shiro. Believing this to be an unbelievable opportunity, the god promptly produced a chessboard and began jotting down any key abilities he intended to bestow upon Shiro. Before long, their allotted time concluded, and Shiro was dispatched to the fantastical realm of Medias. Upon regaining consciousness, he discovered himself amidst a dense woodland. Overwhelmed with joy at this new lease on life, he quickly rose and began surveying his surroundings, eventually navigating his way out of the world. In the distance, he noticed a small village. His immediate impulse was to investigate what interesting discoveries awaited him, but he reasoned that arriving penniless would make him appear suspicious, and he delicately received no sustenance. Hudson recalled the god's promise of enhanced scouting abilities, which they could employ to locate valuable items and components, selling them for a substantial profit. They confidently stood, a stick in hand, and blowed a command to activate his magic. Yet, nothing occurred. A wave of fear washed over him, making him question if the deity had deceived him, but he soon deduced that he had merely used the wrong incantation. The moment the third surge, his scouting magic instantly activated, pinpointing the whereabouts of every gatherable item within the forest. Recognizing the immense utility of this power, he proceeded to test another skill designated to provide additional details regarding specific objects. After experimenting with various phrases, the words can finally trigger his informational abilities, allowing him to glean extensive data on potential foraging targets. Much like someone at a buffet, Shiro collected every possible item he could find. He meticulously assessed their quality and then stored them in his magically enchanted side bag, which possessed an unlimited storage capacity, free from any hidden cost or subscriptions. With his collected resources securely stashed, he resolved to head for the village as the sun began to dip below the horizon. Shiro eventually arrived at the village's primary entrance, overseeing the solitary guard. Shiro's greeting roused the man from his slumber, revealing that the villagers were all remarkably short, making Shiro a towering figure among them and, he mused, a potential magnet for female attention. The guard inquired if Shiro was a swordsman or agnayer. To his surprise, Shiro explained that he was primarily a gatherer, a profession uncommon in this realm. The guard unbarred the gate for Shiro, directing him to the central shop. Typically handling such transactions, Shiro stepped into the tranquil village and proceeded along its broad main thoroughfare. Many villagers observed him from a distance, curious about the newcomer. Shiro, however, headed directly for the primary mercantile establishment and stepped inside the dimly lit shop. The proprietor behind the counter offered a cordial welcome, asking what Shiro wished to sell. Shiro presented a smooth, oval stone. The shopkeeper took it, instantly identifying it as untethered droppings, and declared it the most flawless sample he had ever encountered. He expressed keen interest in purchasing it for 5 silver coins. Shiro quickly calculated That is amounted to roughly 350 modern currency units. An amount far exceeding what man might ever possess. He promptly accepted the offer, much to the shopkeeper as the legend, who excitedly stroked his own face. The merchant then inquired if Shiro had other goods for sale, prompting Shiro to display the entire collection he had amassed from the forest. The shopkeeper was utterly astonished by the sheer volume and exceptional quality of the items, questioning why Shiro would bring such valuable wares to a modest village, when we could fetch a fortune in a major city. Shiro quickly fabricated a story, claiming to be a wandering collector merely passing through and exploring various regions. Despite the lie, the shopkeeper discerned Shiro as potential and offered him a time to retrieve precious gems from the nearby frozen packs. A dangerous area where monsters were known to roam. Shiro hesitated, unsure if he wanted to undertake such a perilous quest immediately. The merchant's offer of 20,000 for the games left him no choice but to agree. With the deal's truth, he said goodbye to the shopkeeper and began to explore the village. Eventually, he located an inn, secured a cozy room, and collapsed onto the firm bed, exhausted from his day's effort, and longing for a refreshing bath. To cleanse himself of the day's accumulated filth, just then, a knock sounded, and a young girl entered, carrying a basin brimming with water for his ablutions. However, Shiro, accustomed only to shower, expressed confusion, wondering what he was meant to do with the provided setup. The girl informed him he smelled and should clean himself with a damp cloth, but Shiro persisted, inquiring if a shower was available instead. Puzzled, the girl explained that such amenities didn't exist for commoners. Only nobility enjoyed proper baths, while others were expected to clean themselves using just water and a towel. Shiro found it incredible that a simple bath was a luxury denied to ordinary people. But the girl mentioned that certain mages possessed the ability to conjure baths for others, for a fee. These revelations sparked an immediate idea in Shiro's mind, and they gently ushered the girl out of the room. After giving her payment and a small gratuity, once the door was shut, Shiro began experimenting with his magical abilities, eventually succeeding in casting a spell that granted him control over water, enabling him to enjoy a long-awaited bath. Refreshed, he then collapsed onto the bed, overcome by weariness. Toga still yearned for his modern showers. He chose to sleep to ensure an early start the following morning. He woke with the first light of day and headed back into the forest, seeking various items to collect. While foraging for mushrooms, he noticed an unusual mark emanating from a thicket. Upon investigation, he discovered a decomposed body on the forest floor. Startled, he stumbled backward and fell. After regaining his composure, he took a closer look, realizing the deceased was a member of the security corps, likely killed battling monsters. He pondered whether to simply abandon the seat, but ultimately was against ini. He carefully interred the body deep in the earth, then placed his own sword upright to serve as a makeshift headstone for the fallen individual. Having completed this solemn task, he turned his thoughts to preparing dinner. As the sun was already descending, he first conjured a protective magical barrier around himself before settling onto the ground. Rather than foolishly placing a pot over an open flame, he intelligently decided to prepare his own meal using wild green vegetables he had gathered. Incorporating some meat he possessed, he crafted a stew that proved exceptionally delicious, concluding the evening on a high note. The following morning, he approached the airy forest, choked with dead trees and dense fog, making visibility poor effect in daylight. He activated his light magic to see. He ventured into the forest, aware of its reputation for harboring numerous monsters. Yet as far as he could discern, there was no living presence within. He began collecting valuable items, and once finished, decided to depart. Spotting a light at the exit, he hastened towards it. Unbeknownst to him, He was rushing directly towards Aprillo's leg, causing him to fall into a cavern. A descent that would have been fatal, had it not been for his swift thinking. He employed flight magic to regain control, hovering mid-air before gently landing on the ground. He exhaled a sigh of relief, realizing his narrow escape from death, and resolved to approach things more seriously and with greater caution henceforth. Inside the cafe, he reactivated his light magic, and to his astonishment, the area was rich with various ores. He promptly took out a small hammer, reset toward, chiseling ores from the surrounding rocks, quickly filling his back with a substantial amount. He then noticed another ore in the distance. However, a sudden earthquake reminded him of the limited time he had. He quickly used his variable magic to blast the rock, aiming to retrieve the ore faster. To his delight, this ore was the Misrael or the shopkeeper desired. He quickly pocketed it but chose to venture deeper, even after another tremor struck. After some time, he observed a blue light emanating from the tunnel and, following it, he discovered an opening revealing the bluest like he had ever seen. He swiftly descended the rocket to inspect the light, which turned out to contain a still magical water. This was, by far, the most remarkable discovery he had made. He immediately decided he must take some with him but began to ponder whether his container was large enough, and if it would lay. Before he could decide, a colossal black dragon erupted from the depths. It sprayed water everywhere, drenching Shiro, and roared, demanding to know who disturbed its depths late. Shiro, however, remained unfazed, having seen Anoge, reverting to his enraged behavior as a subservient salaryman who always bowed. He prostrated himself before the dragon, apologizing for entering its lair. The dragon found this hilarious, having never encountered such composure, and inquired about his identity. Shiro replied he was a normal human, a claim the dragon refused to believe, sensing an immense magical energy flowing through Shiro, almost on par with the magical energy of dragon stem cells. The dragon asked Shiro for help, stating that only someone with incredible magic could assist it in its current predicament. It explained that it had an egg that had not hatched despite a long time passing and asked if Shiro could help with it. It promised not to ask for free, simply touching the water, from which dozens of judicial ores emerged. Shiro immediately agreed to the arrangement. The dragon then produced a black egg and tossed it towards Shiro. Shiro took the egg, attempting to listen for a heartbeat before wondering what exactly he was supposed to do with it. Suddenly, he remembered eggs needed warmth, so he used his head magic to infuse the shell with warmth. The egg abruptly began siphoning Shiro's energy, making him question if it was a ship and if he was about to dehydrate when blackout. He found himself surrounded by warm water, where another black-haired cup of god appeared, claiming Shiro's actions were disrupting the world's flow. Shiro asked if he was dead, but the god replied, "Not yet." With her, Shiro regained his senses, walking in darkness. He used his light magic, only to discover that the baby dragon had successfully hatched from its young. The parent dragon appeared overjoyed as the hatchling found its footing. The dragon thanked Shiro for his assistance and asked him to name it like an idiot. Shiro decided to tell the baby dragon back, after which the dragon completely shocked Shiro by declaring that the would now reside with him. Shiro couldn't believe such an incredibly rare and beautiful creature could be born to him. But the large black dragon assured him that he was an incredibly smart and capable of protecting the baby. The dragon disappeared beneath the water as survived, leaving Shiro and Bee to continue their journey together. Shiro and Bee soon exited the cave, and it was already evening. Bee began flying around joyfully, experiencing the outside world for the first time, while Shiro realized dusk was approaching. He decided to set up camp near the end and filled a glass with the magical water from the lake. The ancient dragon had used its magic to connect Shiro's magic back directly to the lake, As the magical water was absolutely essential for BS growth, she quickly finished on glass. She then asked for another, and Shiro poured a refill. However, Bee kindly handed it to him, wanting him to drink the nutritious water. And be happy too. Afterward, Shiro used some magic stones to create a barrier. Bypassing the need to speak full spells alone, he knew that magic stones were exceedingly rare in this world. A fact he learned from a book borrowed from Shakespeare. However, this was not an issue for him, as he could easily create magic stones. He concentrated his magic in his palm, creating a magic stone that produced a controlled flame for cooking. With the fire lit, Shiro began preparing match stew. Bee started drooling uncontrollably upon seeing it. Shiro told them she should be able to digest some stew and poured her a bowl, warning her that it was too hot. But Bee gulped it down quickly, burning her tongue with a rather pathetic display for a dragon. Shiro had to blow on the stew to call it enough for her to drain. Bee drank until she was filled and exhausted. Shiro found her incredibly cute, but then asked if she did miss her dad at all and immediately jumped to hug him. To tell him she was happy to be with him, Shiro checked her stats and found she was already at rank B and possessed some impressive gifts. He was shocked to read it, but reasoned that no matter how strong she was, B was still a child and needed an adult to guide her. He began telling her that, even if she was stronger than him, she should not act recklessly and must listen to him. But the baby dragon was too sleepy and started snoring mad laughter. Watching her sleep, Shiro mused that he had indeed gained a cutie partner, though not in the way he had asked the cup of god, and wondered if the god had done this on purpose. The next morning, Shiro climbed the cliff he had fallen from yesterday, reaching the forest. To his surprise, the forest looked completely different. He attributed this to one of the peculiar occurrences in this world, as they began exploring the nearby area. Shiro decided to search for a useful item, and soon discovered a bunch of new herbs. Suddenly, he felt a strange tingling sensation, and the very next moment, a visibly frightened bee flees towards Shiro, prompting him to scan the surroundings for threat. His radar promptly displays multiple monster indicators. This is unexpected, as he encountered no creatures the day before. He speculated if his previously deterrent Odan, which kept monsters away, has now faded, been eliminated. Shiro is apprehensive about ngaging test beast, hoping to acquire valuable resources. Upon their defeat, nevertheless, the Prill is they confined to the wood. A rank rock falcon soon materializes behind him. WHLAB is petrified by the first looking beast. Shiro considers it rather endearing next to an ancient dragon. Upon reviewing the creature as detailed, he discovers its meat is delicious, providing sufficient motivation for the hunt. He begins by conjuring a shield. Subsequently, he unleashes his pickaxe at the rock falcon, felling it immediately. Shiro is pleased to have secured an ingredient, but his satisfaction is short-lived when, being indicates more monsters emerging from the forest. He pivots to see wolves with serpentine tails approaching and opts for a direct confrontation. He then casts enhancement spells to augment his agility and speed. As the initial wolf lunges, he evades it with a high leap. Following this, he uses magic to render his body incredibly resilient. He then delivers a powerful kick to the first wolf as head, instantly incapacitating it. The remaining wolf is charged, but Shiro's speed allows him to effortlessly dodge their assault and eliminate them. With a series of strong, rapid kicks, Shiro gathers men from the fallen creatures, only to soon notice even more monsters advancing from the woods. Growing irritated, realizing he can't battle indefinitely, Bee offers assistance by attempting to flee away with him. Shiro doubts her capability, but Bee, with surprising strength, manages to leave him. Shiro then aids her by casting a spell to significantly decrease his own mass. Unprepared for the sudden lightning, Bee rockets skyward. Shiro, alarmed, warns her about the excessive altitude causing the startled beast to release her grip. Shiro screams during his descent, but the forest canopy cushions his fall, allowing him to land unharmed. Beast quickly follow, showering him with legs, much to Shiro's subtle annoyance. Rising, he realizes the effect excited the forest, thanks to BS incredible speed, comparable to a fighter jet. He expresses gratitude for her help, requesting she temper her strength slightly. Next time, as he is considerably more delicate. However, B, not comprehending his complex word, embraces him so tightly that she cracks a few of his ribs. Afterward, they continue their trek towards the village. Shiro then brandishes a branch he retrieved from his backpack, informing B it is from the mythical tree Yggdrasil, forbid to represent the entire world. However, it is presently dormant. By and knowing how to awaken it, exhales a cloud of foul-smelling gas, transforming the small branch into a formidable staff. Shiro is astonished by this transformation, questioning if a mere gatherer like himself should wield a staff, yet wary of being mistaken for an ordinary wizard or something similar. His musings are abruptly cut short by a thunderous roar. Shiro instantly becomes vigilant and prepares for combat. However, Bedas towards the source of the sound, causing Shiro concern. He pursues her, discovering her circling a tree. Upon reaching it, he encounters a disheveled and weary elf. He inquires if she was assaulted by the creature, but she denies it. Suddenly, her stomach emits the very loud, roaring sound that had previously alarmed Shiro. The elf woman explained, she hasn't consumed food in 3 days, and Shiro struggles to believe that the formidable roar originated from her own stomach. She requests water, and he promptly offers this bottle, which she drains completely in a single gulp. While the water provides some relief, it does nothing to sate her hunger. Shiro then starts searching for a lunchbox she had packed. He presents the lunchbox to the elf, who ravenously consumes its contents, then exclaims with immense joy that the meal is incredibly delicious. So much so that she feels she is in paradise. Shiro is surprised, having never imagined elves could act so unnerving. He points out that the food only seems so palatable, because she has been famished for 3 days. He then questions how she could deplete her provisions so rapidly, especially with a village located relatively close by. She grows uneasy with his query, prompting Shiro to test her, remarking that even inexperienced newcomers bring a lunchbox on their travels. The elf becomes irate and approaches him, ready to argue, but Shiro recoils instantly due to her unpleasant odor. This racist with Uchedi. Status he expected elves to smell of peppermint and strawberries, but she reeks of fresh manure. The elf's anger intensifies, and she retorts that she couldn't maintain her hygiene due to jumping for several days. She then prepares for a swift departure, thanking Shiro for the meal. But at this time, it is Gaito mocks someone Yove Jasmine. With her, she flees, leaving Shiro somewhat disheartened after his initial interaction with an elf. Regardless, he resumes collecting materials before leaving the forest. Betian detects a carriage approaching from more than a mile distance. Shiro is genuinely impressed by her kind saying, so, the chariot draws near, and Shiro is mesmerized to see it being pulled by a unicorn. The merchant operating the vehicle is equally surprised by his presence and inquires about his activities. Shiro informs him he is en route to Torumi village. On foot, the merchant is family 10 packs from the carriage to observe the stranger. The man teaches Shiro as staff and ask if he is a wizard or similar. Shiro nervously responded that he is merely a gatherer. The man finds this even more impressive. Nothing that skilled gatherers are uncommon in this world. He then invites Shiro to join them. As they are also traveling to Torumi village, he questions if Shiro has considerable age and whether it would be an issue for the chariot, but the man assures him it is no problem whatsoever. Shiro accepts the invitation and boards the chariot, discovering the children are entertained by his exceptional hair. As Shiro expresses gratitude to the family for the lift, they assure him it's no trouble, as mutual assistance is common among people in this area. They exhibit remarkable friendliness towards him, and Shiro senses they are overly trusting. He asks what their reaction would be if you were abandoned, then attempts to frighten the children. However, the boy explains he couldn't be abandoned because the bell hadn't met. Confused, Shiro is then shown a bill containing a magic crystal by the woman. This building has an alternative individual explorers. Since actively made through Chanka, dia melahirkan Valkredikus dan memiliki kerasan. He then suddenly recala he hasn't introduced himself. He projects to share information about himself with the family. Who, in turn, introduce themselves as the carriage river is Palam, and his wife is Eliza. Their children are named Yunin and Kan. As they exchange pleasantries, B abruptly begins making sound, which the children quickly notice. The children realize the noise emanates from Shiro's back. Eager to discover what he is concealing beneath his coat, Shiro becomes uneasy, explaining it is a rare monster, and they may be startled by its appearance. Eliza reassures him, stating, it is not unusual for adventurers to have monster companion. This remark emboldens Shiro to release B, but not before cautioning her against beating Anyan. The children are instantly charmed. Baby is adorable now, while the parents express surprise. Given the rarity of dragon, Palam then asks Shiro if he is a dragon nigger, saying as he possesses a pet dragon, to which Shiro clarifies that the accidental discovery and hatching of a dragon egg astounds Palam and Eliza, who remark on the extreme rarity of dragon titans. They added that dragons are events charger. Shiro, recalling anime from his previous life, develops a keen interest in dragon creatures, imagining them as formidable warriors. As dusk falls, the family prepares to make camp. Shiro conjures light and strategically positions magic stones around their chosen spot. He explains that these stones will form a protective barrier against monsters, with be serving as an alarm if danger approaches. The family, however, pledges their complete faith in B. Days later, subtle disappointment registers with Shiro. Eliza begins to prepare dinner, but Shiro volunteers to cook instead. He retrieves cooking tools and various ingredients from his magical section, much to the family's astonishment. He then begins to cook using the items he gathered earlier that day. The resulting meal delights everyone, with Palam even shedding tears of joy, having grown weary of consuming only dead meat. Throughout their journey, he declares Shiro a true magician of taste, prompting laughter from the group. They then share songs and dances before retiring for the nature. For Shiro, accustomed to solitary meals on Earth, this communal dining experience is profoundly enjoyable. He finds the companionship during meals to be truly wonderful. At daybreak, Palam is already both cleaning the chariot and its harness, while the children remain asleep, with Ben nestled comfortably between them. Shiro is also awake, sitting on the ground, meticulously polishing his scissors until they gleam. Eliza soon emerges from the chariot, having organized their belongings, and greets Shiro, remarking that proper tool maintenance is a hallmark of a skilled adventurer. Shiro reflects on his recent enjoyment of life, pondering if his accidental acquisition of the gatherer class may actually align with a natural aptitude. Before long, they prepare to resume their travels. Shiro requests to take the reins for a while, and Palam readily consents. His son settles into the front seat beside Palam, and they proceed smoothly. The unicorn professes to be remarkably intelligent, responding perfectly to Shiro's every instruction. Be fully awakened shortly after, promptly fleeing to Shiro and perching near his legs, following another uneventful couple of hours of travel. They touched their first sight of Torami village. Arriving at its main gate shortly thereafter, Shiro disembarks at this point. Palom and his family expressed their gratitude for the pleasant journey before continuing. The guard at the gate appears to recognize Palom, noting that always heralds sprint. Intrigued, Shiro inquires about Palom's profession. The guard explains that Palom, as a weaver, travels with his family to warmer regions. Therefore, Palom's arrival in the village signifies the imminent arrival of warm spring and summer weather. The guard also mentions a recent scarcity of game in the arena, which helps Shiro understand Palom's immense appreciation for his cooking. He silently thanks the gods for his gathering abilities, which ensure he never worries about sustenance or financial concerns. A short time later, he visits the shopkeeper who gave him the quest, presenting all the items he collected. The shopkeeper meticulously examines each item, but one particular rock captures his attention. He then addresses Shiro, inquiring about the rock's origin, revealing it's not merely mithril ore, but magical mithril ore. Shiro, however, is completely unaware of its significance. The shopkeeper declares it to be legendary material. This revelation finally startles Shiro, who asks if it is valuable. The shopkeeper attempts to convey the magnitude of his discovery, explaining that the stone holds an immense concentration of mana. He adds that merely 2 or 3 such stones could power the entire kingdom as magical infrastructure. Shiro is stunned but chooses not to disclose his unique ability. He therefore asserts he found it by chance. The shopkeeper, unconvinced, suggests that even a random find implies considerable skill, combined with significant luck. He advises Shiro that his talents are underutilized here and recommends traveling to the larger city of Belam. There, Shiro would encounter individuals capable of purchasing such rare items and gain a deeper understanding of the world. He also proposes joining a guild, which could offer advanced knowledge beneficial for future adventurers. That evening, relaxing in his room, Shiro researches guild and the life of an adventurer. He recognizes the potential advantages of an adventurer as life but feels no urgency. He resolves that his next major step will be to journey to Belham and enlist in a guild, but for the time being, he plans to remain in Torame. Over the next few days, he offers the map from the best. He wanted Arlil to be quiet for the entire village, given the local game shortage, everyone relishes the taste of the man, and despite potential salmonella, even the village troublemakers enjoy it, marking the end for Asukes. He spends a few more days exploring the village and gathering resources, but soon prepares for his departure. A kind old woman provides him with an assortment of seasoning and speeches for his travels. She expresses the villagers' desire for him to stay longer, as they have grown fond of his presence. Shiro promises to visit again someday, but explains he must continue his journey to ensure he is well provisioned for the long, month-long trip to Belam. The old lady gives him several packet homemade meals. She advises him to return to the village if he ever feels homesick. Shiro thanks her warmly before returning to his room. He settles before their extensive journey the next day and is about to lie down himself when he reflects on the village as kindness. He considers how he might reciprocate their generosity. With this thought, he rises from his bed and approaches the table, where a lantern and the magical mithril stone rest. He contemplates the village guard as constant vigil, day and night, to protect the village from monsters. Using his ingenuity and the mana from the magic stones, he uses the lantern, crafting a new magical artifact. The following morning, as he prepares to depart, the entire village gathers to bid him farewell. He recognizes that this small community has truly become his home. A page he used to return to. He presents him with the magical item he fashioned, explaining to the guard that it can project a protective barrier, shielding them from any approaching hostile creatures. The villagers are immensely thankful for this incredible gift, but the shopkeeper takes the item, examining it closely before asking Shiro if he incorporated the magical mithril stone He opens the bottom, extracting the stone, which is indeed inside. Before the shopkeeper can object and insist Shiro take the stone, Shiro quickly departs, instructing him to keep it for the village. The whole village waves goodbye as his journey recommences. The crisp morning air invigorates him as he traverses the expansive fields. While relishing the pleasant weather, he unexpectedly encountered an enormous crab creature. Though initially terrified, he quickly chose to examine the monster's attributes. Upon discovering it was merely a giant monster, suggesting it wouldn't pose a significant challenge, he also observed that the crab was reportedly edible. This revelation made his mood water, and he informed Bo of crab meat as exquisite tasty, preparing for combat. He then employed his magic to fortify his physique. However, before he could even formulate an offensive strategy, B unleashed a supersonic blast, instantly incapacitating the creature. Yet, before he could carve it up, two additional crabs materialized nearby, scuttling from side to side. He began devising a tactic, assuming their movement was restricted to lateral motion, which he could exploit. To his utter dismay, the crabs abruptly charged straight towards him, leaving no opportunity to evade. He questioned if this moment marked the conclusion of his adventure. Fortunately, B proved far more capable, seizing him by the collar and hoisting him seaward thus as the two crabs violently collided. Both crustaceans perished instantly, but the frail hunter subsided. The initial crab reanimated and began rushing towards him once more. Shiro, this time, was better prepared. He drew his staff and delivered a powerful blow, instantly dispatching the creature. That evening, they anticipated a substantial meal. Thus, Shiro employed his enchantments to strengthen his hand, using it to sever the crab legs. He then plunged them into a pot, adding water and various species to concoct a rich stew. Once the meat was cooked, they cracked open the shell and savored their initial taste of crab in this unfamiliar world. Finding the flavors utterly delightful, Shiro felt a sense of accomplishment. He expressed to Bai's incredible satisfaction and eagerness to explore further, hoping to sample more of this magnificent world as culinary offerings. It seemed the villagers had been deceitful individuals. For I am quite certain it took him less than a month to arrive at the city of Gulf, a massive fortified settlement bordered on one side by water. He joined the queue with other commoners to enter the city. However, realizing he might attract undue notice, he used his magic to disguise his enchanted bag as an ordinary one. He even instructed B to conceal himself temporarily. Soon after, he was summoned by the immigration department, where they meticulously inspected his luggage and identification to confirm he posed no threat of destabilizing agent. Their procedure, however, appeared quite lame, as they merely employed a rudimentary magical scan to ascertain a criminal history while a female officer examined his bag. She discovered nothing unusual. The hero was curious about how his attributes appeared to others, but he deduced they must seem unremarkable. This was because the deity had ensured they would they conspicuously stand out. The official informant he appeared to be clear, yet possessed a peculiar blessing of the dragon. This particular detail perplexed them. Shiro chose to disclose the truth too, presenting Bai's adorable appearance instantly captivated them. However, the security agent instructed him to affix a tag to the dragon, citing the impossibility of having unidentified, potentially dangerous entities roaming freely. Shiro utilized a bracelet he possessed, fastening it around Bai's tail, thereby finalizing their immigration process. With that, they were granted entry into the city. He was immediately captivated by the vibrant metropolis, where individuals of various races moved purposefully towards their destinations. Observing people purchasing provisions, acquiring armor, and heading to training facilities, among other activities, he wandered in wonder. Before spotting the jewel, hard in the distance, he proceeded directly to the Adventurers Guild, entering a magnificent, hall bustling with diverse warrior and companions. Suddenly, he was approached by Arya. A senior Bonigirm, who greeted him to the guild and inquired if he wished to register. Shiro assented, following her to a counter where she meticulously recorded all his particulars. She then asked about a prior combat experience. Shiro responded that his experience was limited, so he had indeed battled an unusual avian creature. He also mentioned encountering some snake wolves and numerous colossal crabs. Arya appeared bewildered and questioned if he possessed any evidence to substantiate his claims. So, hopefully she reached into his seemingly bottomless pocket and produced an entire decayed crab, dropping it onto the table where it promptly splintered from its own mass. Arya, startled, fled outside, while everyone else in the guild congregated to witness the commotion. One of the Baskin present utilized his unique ability to assess Shiro. He then advised Arya to compose herself, stating that Shiro did not appear to be a dangerous individual. Shiro was somewhat perplexed by this, but the Baskin clarified that he possessed a unique power. This ability allowed him to perceive the intentions of others. Arid our wolf signified a desire to cause mischief, but since Shiro's aura was blue, he should be harmless. Shiro was relieved by this, but the Baskin then inquired why he was carrying a dead crab. Shiro responded that, naturally, he intended to consume it, asserting that only a fool would squander perfectly good crabmen. This, however, scandalized the guild members, as it appeared the inhabitants of this world did not typically consume crabs, yet they proved more tolerant and political climate, allowing him to forget suspicious. Winterton, the mistaken card to complete the situation. He then asked Shiro if he had any companion, to which Shiro responded that his sole partner, for the moment, was his dragon. Break. This revelation genuinely astonished the observers. Given that few had ever encountered dragons, and for someone to be a gatherer or rare class in itself and then possess an exceptionally rare bias, seemed almost inconceivable. Nevertheless, Shiro stood there, instantly becoming the center of attention, as several guilds began extending invitations to their gatherings. Arya opted to lead him to an adjacent room for a private discussion. While Shiro had anticipated a more intimate gesture beneath the table, he merely retrieved the guild's official mark on his application. This confirmed his status as a legitimate adventurer. With his application finalized, Arya presented him with a copper bracelet, signifying his errand. This rank was the starting point for all new recruits. Shiro, however, was unconcerned as he began envisioning all the incredible escapades he would now embark upon. A mere fortnight had passed since Shiro's arrival in this city, and they had already become a highly regarded figure. He consistently delivered exceptionally high quality goods that sold out instantly, establishing him as the city's preeminent gatherer by a significant margin. Consequently, he received an interesting number of assignments, with Clint specifically requesting his services. This was particularly due to his reasonable fees and the exceptional value he provided. He returned to the guild once more, depositing a fresh haul of magical mushrooms. These had been acquired from Mike Tesson. The best man stationed behind the counter meticulously examined the fungi, aware that Mike accepted only the finest specimen, lest they resort to extreme measures. With Shiro, however, there was never any cause for concern, as the mushrooms consistently proved to be essentially due to record compensated. Arya slipped into the room, carrying a stack of additional quests for him, asserting that numerous clients had specifically requested Shiro's expertise. As the designated gatherer, Shiro surveyed the multitude of quests she held and informed her that undertaking all of them simultaneously was simply impossible. Consequently, he accepted half, while Arya retained the remainder for suffocating. With that matter settled, Shiro resolved to relax for a while. He made his way to the bathhouse for a delightful warm sun, Wake thoroughly alleviated the ache from his body. He exhaled a contented sighing. The warm water enveloped his form with a soothing touch, akin to a lover's embrace, while F&B appeared to be reveling in the experience, swimming playfully in the water, devoid of any concerns. Shiro recalled the repulsive and unsanitary state of the bathwater upon his initial arrival, but thanks to his magical abilities, he could now purify and reuse it. Immersed in warm water, Shiro's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Clay, a silver-skinned lizard man who entered the bathhouse. Clay greeted Shiro, inquiring about his well-being. Shiro confirmed he was fine, then questioned Clay's presence, as he was typically engaged in adventuring elsewhere. As Clay stepped into the bath alongside Shiro, he explained that he wouldn't usually be there at this hole, but his old injury had been flaring up, causing him considerable discomfort. Consequently, he had come to seek the soothing relief of the warm water. He then shifted his attention to Shiro, mentioning recent rumors he had heard. These rumors suggested Shiro possessed healing magic, having reportedly used air to cure a destitute ailing man from the slum. Shiro merely offered a smile in response. Shiro clarified that he had simply replicated something he had witnessed previously. Clay then asked if he had accepted payment from the slum dweller, so he already knew the answer. Knowing Shiro would take charge of the impoverished land, Clay suggested that Shiro could amass a fortune by utilizing his healing abilities to treat others. Healers were perpetually in high demand, but Shiro pondered whether established healer would charge exorbitant fees for their services, would resent him. Clay simply chuckled. Clay inquired if Shiro had retrieved the notification for a rank promotion. Shiro, however, stated his contentment with his current status and his disinterest in advancing his rank anytime soon. His desire was to remain out of the public eye. Clay warned that such an attitude would inevitably push him further into the spotlight, potentially creating adversaries. These enemies would spare no effort to ensure his downfall. With that piece of concern, Clay rose from the bath and departed after his relaxing shower. He returned to the receptionist, where he collected payment for his work. While being munched on crackers, the receptionist, however, reiterated her question. She asked precisely when Shiro intended to elevate his rank. Shiro smiled and declined, asserting that he still needed to refine certain skills before considering a promotion. He acknowledged that a higher rank would likely secure him more lucrative assignments from the guild, benefiting both himself and the organization. Yet, he currently found himself in an advantageous position, earning a living without compromising his personal freedom, just as he was about to retire to his room. A messenger burst into the guild, proclaiming that Deep City was under imminent threat from a goblin horde. Instantly, the entire guild sprang into action. Warriors were summoned, preparing their armor and shields, while the guild master questioned one of the scouts about the arcade controller. The smart, most likely reported that only Clay was available, as the others were already engaged in missions. The guild master instructed her to summon Clay immediately and declared that every adventurer of Deran and above must participate in the impending battle. Shiro observed the unfolding chaos. However, they concluded it was his concern, given his friend's status, yet the guild master ultimately called upon him, asserting their need for his assistance. The guild master disclosed that the goblins would likely assault from the western flank, attempting to breach the main gate. Therefore, their optimal defense strategy was to prevent them from ever crossing the bridge leading to the main gate. A resounding cheer erupted throughout the guild. Warriors enthusiastically drew their swords, making Shiro realize these individuals were truly jokes who relished the prospect of battle. In contrast, he considered himself more of the liberal type who preferred matcha lattes with oatmeal. Suddenly, two burly, office men standing nearby began to taunt him. They warned him to stay clear, lest their be trampled beneath their feet. Before Shiro could deliver a witty retort, the Guild Master intervened. He asked Shiro if he was the gatherer he had been hearing about for some time. He mentioned that certain guild member had been excessively praising him. This was with the Guild Master, Green, decided to put into the test to ascertain his true capabilities. Green was also impressed by the fact that Shiro was one of the rare individuals who remained unfazed by his presence and wished him good fortune. He entrusted the most daring Mao to Shiro and took the two brutes with. Mao turned to Shiro and apologized, explaining that FR and KID adventurers were typically excluded from seeking achievement, but Grid must have perceived something special in him, which was why he was permitting Shiro to fight. This appeared to be Mau's inaugural battle as well, as she was overly excited at the prospect of finally encountering genuine adversaries. However, that initial excitement quickly morphed into terror on the battlefield, as she found herself trembling uncontrollably from fear and anxiety. She continuously flinched at builds in the vicinity. She clutched Shiro as tightly as possible, pleading with him to protect her. Shiro realized this would prove problematic if she continued to impede his movements during an actual skirmish. So, he instructed her to calm down for the moment. As the hunter evacuated an enemy, let alone engaged in combat, he offered her a brief motivational speech. He advised her to simply concentrate on tending to the injured adventurers, emphasizing that this alone would be immensely helpful. Mao seemed to feel somewhat better after this, and she finally traced train before hurrying back to the camp to assist the wounded. Clay as Laughter startled Shiro, who had anticipated finding him at the same location. They began conversing, and Shiro immediately questioned why Clay was on the front liners, given he was one of their most skilled fighters. Clay responded that his Oscar had been causing him significant pain recently. Without a relief, Shiro instantly pinpointed the exact location of the scar, which surprised Clay somewhat. Clay asked Shiro if he believed the scar was sustained while flying, as it was on his back. However, Shiro shook his head in disagreement. He knew Clay well enough to deduce that he would never retreat from an enemy, implying the wound was likely injured while defending someone very dear to him. He asserted that the scar was a testament to Clay's bravery, signifying he had risked his life to save another, and even after that, he was once again on the battlefield, prepared to aid Anion in need. Before they could continue their conversation, Clay noticed a distant cloud of dust approaching, which suddenly contorted his face in horror as he realized that the Guild Master's defensive formations must have failed, and the goblins had breached the area. He immediately seized a spear and prepared for combat. Shiro urged him to stay back, since his charges were bothering him, but Clay declared they had no friend to protect today and charged towards the advancing enemies. Shiro realized he too must now join the fray, so with a sigil, he retrieved his magic staff and erected a protective barrier around the tent area where the wounded were being treated. He instantly employed his super speed to rush to the battle, where he discovered only a few disheveled adventurers being overwhelmed by the attacking goblins. The two brutes who had attempted to bully Shiro were also present, holding their ground against the foes, but several goblins managed to bypass them, heading towards the city. Shiro had no intention of allowing them to pass, however, and he used his magic to harden his body before violently striking the goblin. He realized these goblins were considerably more formidable than the adversaries he had previously encountered, so he requested by his assistants, who promptly descended from his shoulder and unleashed a powerful electrical attack. BS attack shocked every single goblin in the vicinity, instantly incapacitating them. The other adventurers thanked Shiro for his timely intervention, claiming that things had been proceeding according to plan. But a high-ranking goblin sergeant suddenly materialized, completely collapsing the front line. It was only thanks to Clay, having successfully retreated and maintained their position until this point. Shiro senses Clay's potential pride and promptly hurries into the dense wood. There, He eventually discovers Clay engaged in combat with a horde of goblins, systematically dispatching them. However, to Shiro's dismay, his old scars begin to drop with pain. The intense agony causes his legs to give way, a critical error that goblins immediately exploit by attempting to overwhelm him. Fortunately, Shiro intervenes at the last possible moment. This sudden intervention utterly stuns the goblins, preserving Clay as life, just as they were about to retreat. Nevertheless, a hobgoblin emerged, longing to strike, but both managed to evade its assault. Despite their effort, they find themselves encircled by goblins once more. Clay urges Shiro to escape while he covers their retreat, but Shiro opts for an unconventional approach, startling several goblins. This creates a moment of disarray, allowing Shiro to retrieve the mana-infused water from the cave. He then doses Clay with Heal before enchanting a potent healing spell. This spell not only fully restores his bed but also morphs him into Kaiju no 8. Following this transformation, Clay proceeds to utterly annihilate every last goblin. He accomplishes this feat entirely by himself, and as the rain subsides, Clay is the sole figure left standing. The guild master subsequently appears, expressing gratitude to Shiro for his unwavering assistance. The guild master plans to compensate him for his aid. That evening, Clay, having reverted to his usual form, enters Shiro's room and inquires about the object Shiro had thrown at him. Shiro clarifies that the liquid was mana-saturated like water sourced from an ancient dragon is then. Clay responds by lamenting that, while his forebears were dragona, he himself is currently no more than a mere lizard. However, he acknowledges that thanks to Shio, we briefly achieved a half-dragon state, yet he confesses his apprehension about utilizing it, fearing he might lose self-control. He worries about devastating his surroundings, but Shiro reassures him not to be overly concerned. Abruptly, Clay's demeanor turns serious, and he directly questions Shiro about his true identity. Shiro ultimately chooses to reveal the truth, explaining that he was reincarnated into this world after his demise in a different realm. Clay struggles to accept this revelation. Nevertheless, given the extraordinary events he has witnessed, he finds himself unable to fully trust his own perceptions anymore. They agree to conclude the evening and retire to their respective sleeping quarters. The following morning, Shiro rises early and ventures into the city for further exploration. He soon discovers a shop offering a diverse array of merchandise and pauses to observe from its window. As the shopkeeper arrives to open the establishment, she inquires if he is interested in a new weaponry or ancient artifacts. Shiro promptly asks the anthropomorphic proprietor if she stocks scissors. He specifies that he needs them for material gathering. She responds that she does not carry such items but instantly deduces that Shiro is the renowned gatherer. She identifies him as the subject of recent conversations and offers to procure him some high-quality scissors. The Fury introduces herself as Reba, adding that Weirhead Blacksmith is an unparalleled artisan. She explains that he is capable of crafting any kind of tool. However, if Shiro desires custom scissors, he must first locate the specific items the blacksmith requires. Shiro finds this condition somewhat perplexing. Consequently, Rebel escorts him inside the shop. He halts abruptly upon observing three blacksmiths diligently working, and Rebel confides that she was captivated. She was captivated by the sight of the blacksmiths hammering the glowing red iron. Afterward, she guides him to the establishment's proprietor, a cantankerous old dwarf, to whom Rebel introduces Shiro. She proposes that Shiro could retrieve some elder ore for them, an essential material they urgently require to triumph in the forthcoming sword-making contest. The critical dwarf retorts that he will not dispatch a merry gatherer into perilous Minas, but Rebel argues that they ought to afford him an opportunity. The dwarf and the Fury begin to bicker, and ultimately, Rebel asserts her dominance over the old man by tugging his beard and declaring, she declares they cannot secure victory in the competition with an inadequately crafted sword. The dwarf shoots back, explaining that the man is exceptionally hazardous at present due to reports of demonic presence. He asserted that his customer safety is paramount, which is why he cannot permit Shiro to venture into the Ruhai Mines. Rebel becomes visibly moved. Upon realizing the depth of the old man's concern for their clientele, she apologizes to Shiro for having consumed his time. Nevertheless, Shiro places a plate of cookies on the table. He then asks the chief blacksmith if he would craft a pair of scissors. For him should he successfully retrieve some Eldra ore from the Ruhai Mines. The dwarf reacts with panic to this proposition. His panic stems from not wanting to be held responsible for Aion as the miss. But Shiro reassures him of his complete self-sufficiency in terms of protection. Shiro then produces a crab claw from his pocket, and upon recognizing it as belonging to a bear-rank monster, the dwarf consents to Shiro's expedition to the mine the following day. Shiro travels Bikariak alongside other adventurers en route to the Ryohei Mines, while Beth continuously dances, thrilled by the prospect of a fresh adventure. Concurrently, the other adventurers converse about the peculiar events recently plaguing the region, such as vegetation inexplicably wilting. They also mention unsettling noises emanating from the forest. Shiro becomes slightly uneasy upon hearing this, pondering if these phenomena are somehow linked to his presence. However, he dismisses this though with just hints back from the career. Facing after Turner, terus tuntutan combat dari on yang accepting ideas. Suddenly, he hears a recognizable voice from a nearby building, bragging that rather for deceived. It professed to be the same foolish elf he had previously rescued. The elf he had suffered earlier in the forest is now informing the trader Tajia that specifically requested a robust white horse capable of such speed it could practically take a fly. Instead, the trader provided her with a colossal white bear, which the elf vehemently rejected. The horse merchant explained that the region embraces a very inclusive definition. His status as a creature capable of transporting cargo is designated a horse, regardless of its species. The elf girl instantly comprehends her error. She realizes her mistake in assuming a horse shop would exclusively sell equine animals. She apologizes for not articulating her request more precisely, revealing that she had actually desired a Pegasus, the merchant did. The merchant informs her that such creatures are exclusively found within the Dwarven Kingdom. Shiro simply observes the entire interaction from afar, causing not to become entangled. He wishes to avoid further involvement with the eccentric woman, even though their destinations allegedly. He resolves to collect some materials en route and promptly enters the forest. He enters to gather mushroom and flowers, while engaged in picking blossom. He hears a thunderous roar, but this time, he instinctively knows it is they from a monster. He tracks the sound to discover the elf woman once again nearly unconscious from hunger. He provides her with water and food, mentally noting her apparent lack of common sense. He must stand clearly as they learned anything from their prior encounter. As soon as the elf finishes her meal, she is revitalized and stands to express her gratitude to Shiro. However, unable to tolerate the pungent odor she emits, he instinctively employs a cleaning spell on her. She is agreeably astonished by this and inquires about his actions. Shiro explains that he used a spell to cleanse her hand because her condition was tarnishing his idealized perception of elves as a race. The elf woman then introduces herself as Faith and thanks Shiro for rescuing her on two separate occasions. He dismisses her gratitude, stating it was trivial, and starts to walk away. But Faith interrupts him, asserting that elves invariably reciprocate kindly, and she wishes to assist him in some capacity. Shiro explicitly stated that he requires nothing in return. On the third, Val insists she will aid him with his tasks. At this point, the fish towards here, and Val observes that even the dragon seems to approve of her. Shiro concludes there is no detriment in allowing her to accompany him until the next settlement. Hetsan resumes his task of gathering mushroom. Soon after, Bill approaches him. She announces that she has discovered some rare monster droppings that command a high price. But it turns out to be merely ordinary animal during the next time she presents it. To his disappointed, Val remains hopeful that the third attempt will succeed. So she procures a toxic mushroom for the evening. Val volunteers to gather kindling for their meal. But Shiro explains it as unnecessary as he possesses magic stones. Val, however, points out that evidence of a campfire serves as a reassuring beacon for other adventurers on this path, signaling a secure place to rest. Shiro acknowledges the validity of her reasoning and permits her to gather timber. Val, however, returns with an enormous, sturdy log, stating it as her preference. Shiro informs her that igniting such a massive piece of wood would be difficult. Val, unfazed, addresses the issue by tossing the log high into the air, then expertly cleaving it into smaller segments with her dagger. Shiro watches in utter astonishment. His surprise dissipated when he discovered Val's daggers are a rank armamentus, clarifying the situation. Afterward, he prepares a delectable stew for the group, and Val is utterly captivated by its flavor. She subsequently inquires if Shiro's destination is also the Dwarven Kingdom, to which he assents, disclosing his intention to extract Ildrawer from the Ruhai mine. He then asks Val her purpose for visiting the Dwarf Kingdom, and she responds with a touch of melancholy, stating she selects the celestial white Pegasus that her sister desires to locate. She quickly shakes off her sorrow, refusing to let it spoil the campfire's atmosphere, and expresses a deeper sense of obligation to Shiro. An idea sparks in his mind, and he proposes that she serve as his protector for the remainder of his travels. Val becomes genuinely enthusiastic about these prospects, envisioning herself safeguarding Shiro from various malevolent foes. However, Shiro's true motive is to acquire practical knowledge, such as the very wood technique she demonstrated earlier. Val appears puzzled, wondering why he requests so little in return for providing her sustenance. Nevertheless, she accepts his proposal. She then adopts the demeanor of a refined and elegant elf as she formally shakes Shiro's hand. Shiro, witnessing her composed manner, suddenly feels a surge of excitement. Yet, this elation about traveling with an elf quickly dissipates when Val begins to snore boisterously, preventing Shiro from sleeping. The following day, he resumes his journey toward the Dwarven Kingdom, having had no rest. Upon arriving at the border city, Shiro immediately seeks out an inn to sample Dwarven dishes, and Val comments that the food is as delectable as her lizardman acquaintance had described it. Shiro mentions that he, too, has a lizardman friend, prompting Val to proudly elaborate on her companion, who serves as the Holy Dragon Knight's Dolph of Panther. The description strikes Shiro as familiar. At that moment, Clay speaks up from a nearby table, inquiring if Val is referring to him. Both Shiro and Val are taken aback to find him present, and Clay then observes that it must be destined that his two friends are journeying together. He then addresses Shiro, questioning how he could have been so inconsiderate as to depart from town without notifying him. Shiro nervously responded that he had informed the guild. Clay, dissatisfied with his explanation, then asks about his destination. Upon discovering Shiro's intention to visit the Rahimines, Clay resumes his lecture, asserting that adventurers of Shiro's caliber are not even permitted to undertake quests involving such perilous locations. He emphasizes the extreme danger of the area and advises Shiro against going unless a substantial reward is involved. Shiro confidently declares that he is indeed retrieving a worthwhile compensation, as a master blacksmith has promised to craft him the ultimate pair of scissors for ingredient collection. Fly is utterly bewildered, perceiving this as an absurd recompense. However, Shiro is convinced that maintaining a good relationship with the blacksmith will lead to him retrieving his quality cooking implements in the future. Clay derides him as an idiot sandwich for accepting such a proposition. Even as Shiro insisted that scissors are the most crucial tool for a higatere. Clay abruptly announces his intention to accompany him on this quest, explaining that he was already planning to visit the dwarf nation to have his PR repaired. Shiro feels uneasy about this development, but then Val enthusiastically asks Clay if he, too, will serve as Shiro as protector. She then begins to proudly describe how she intends to safeguard Shiro until he reaches his destination. Clay finds the idea appealing and resolves to join them as a bodyguard. Shiro, nonetheless, is displeased with this tone of event. While he acknowledges the considerable strength of both Fame and Clay, their distinct personalities cause him concern for his mental tranquility. Shortly thereafter, he arrived at the Dwarven capital, only to find a massive queue outside the city gates. Fortunately, Clay is acquainted with the guards, who permit him and his companions to utilize a special entrance designated for VIPs as the destined a lengthy staircase. The guard provides them with a detailed account of the city's history. Upon entering the city proper, Shiro and Val are awestruck by the fact that the dwarves have excavated an entire mountain to construct this subterranean metropolis. Concurrently, the guard informs Clay that the king wishes to speak with him. Shiro expresses surprise that Clay also has a connection to the monarch, and the lizardman confirms that he is indeed on favorable terms with the king. Despite feeling he does not merit such a relationship, the guard instructs him to chase his modesty, reminding him that he is the hero who restored their nation. Clay dismisses it as a complete misunderstanding and proceeds to recount the actual events to Shiro. He explains that in earlier times, dwarves excelled at crafting weaponry but were notoriously inept at wielding it. Consequently, a formidable demon subjugated them and accepted tribute. One particular day, as Clay was merely traversing the region, the dragon, upon spotting him, immediately took flight for an inexplicable reason. The dwarves, misinterpreting the situation, believed Clay had compelled the demon to flee and subsequently hailed him as a hero. The guard interjected stating that the dwarves continue to regard him as a hero and have even recently unveiled a statue in his honor. Clay, however, buries his face in his hand, exasperated that TV depicted him resembling Godzilla. Upon reaching the royal palace, Clay promptly challenged the king regarding the peculiar statue, but the monarch insisted that everyone in the kingdom finds it impressive. Following the aged king shifts his focus to Shiro and inquires about the purpose of his visit. Shiro presents him with a letter of introduction from the master blacksmith and formally requests authorization to access the Ruha Manor. The king then asks Shiro if he is aware that the manors have transformed into a haven for demons, subsequent to a recent earthquake, and Shiro confirms his knowledge. Clay informs the king that he intends to accompany Shiro as his personal guard and can also vouch for Val as sufficient strength to capture. Upon hearing this, the king grants Shiro and his party permission to enter the Ryuha Minions and investigate the source of the demonic insurgency within. Clay accepts the assignment, while Shiro grumbles that he has no desire to embark on an investigative expedition. However, he holds little influence in the matter, given that Clay is the revered hero of the dwarves and has already given his assent. Shortly thereafter, the trio is guided into the menace by a dwarf named Zambu, and Shiro employs his magical abilities to illuminate the gloomy cavern. He then casts another spell to commit the map Zambu provided to memory, ensuring he won't be lost this way. But his bodyguards comment that he is once again performing feats beyond ordinary capabilities. Shiro disregards their remarks and begins his search for Ildra or using his specialized skills. However, he only manages to locate a meager quantity of inferior quality ores. Zambu is astonished that Shiro could find it all, and just as Shiro proposes venturing deeper into the cave, Zambu warns him of an approaching threat. Everyone assumes a defensive stance, and Shiro utilizes his search ability to confirm the warning. Moments later, two monstrous spiders appear, and Clay swiftly dispatches one with his spear. Shiro immobilizes the remaining creature, allowing Vel the opportunity to deliver the finishing blow. He resumes their trade, and Shiro soon identifies a substantial deposit of high-grade Ildra ore. Concealed behind a blocked passage, he secures Dumbo as concern, then blasts an opening in the rock face, revealing an expansive, empty chamber, brimming with shimmering purple crystals. While Shiro believes this to be the Ildra ore he seeks, Zambo informs him that they are, in fact, Ildra crystal, an even scarcer and more valuable substance. Shiro overlooks the gravity of his fin as B urgently alerts him to an approaching threat. As they step outside, ominous footsteps become audible. Zambo recognizes the sound of an approaching demon. Shiro, stepping forward, instructs Clay and Vel to allow him to confront this foe, emphasizing it as no common feint. This turns out to be a colossal crab demon, which Shiro intends to hunt personally for its exquisite flesh. B, in a celebratory mode, begins to nuzzle him. Shiro confesses his immense joy, visibly salivating at the sight of the incredibly appetizing crab before them. His excitement is so profound he feels a child consume its meat uncooked. As they both foolishly dance, Clay and Vel watch in utter bewilderment. Vel then orders Shiro to chase his distraction. While fetching the creature, due to her timely warning, he spots the crab as attacked, just in time to evade its powerful pincher. Clay and Vel inform Shiro that this particular crab is a formidable rank monster, necessitating their combined efforts to defeat it. Nevertheless, Shiro opts to aura farm rather than allowing their assistance, as he wishes to claim this exquisite mind course for himself. He instructs B to provide cover, but explicitly prohibits the use of fire or lightning-based attacks. Retrieving his staff from his satchel, he lets out a wild laugh before applying numerous enhancement spells to himself, including those that diminish his weight, boost his agility, and fortify his hands and feet. He then charges directly at the crab, leaving both him and Clay in a state of concern. Unexpectedly, B deploys a sonic assault, rendering the crab immobile and disorienting its senses. Shiro capitalizes on this opening, lunging at the crab and striking it with all his might. To his astonishment, his maximum power blow inflicts no harm upon the crab monster as though carapace, which then casually swats him away. Shiro skillfully lands on his feet, fortunately unharmed. Yet, before he can attempt another assault, the crab shoves him back. B intervenes to save him, and launches an easy attack at the crab, freezing its leg to the ground to prevent further aggression. Shiro expresses his gratitude to B for the timely assistance. He then scans the crab, searching for vulnerability. Discovering 3 weak points at its joints, he promptly conjures Easy Class to strike them. B swiftly rotates this Easy Class. By infusing them with wind magic, Shiro then dispatches them to assault the crab, encasing it entirely in HJ. Everyone present is left utterly astonished with this display, while Shiro and B offer prayers for the crab spirit, Vel and Zambo inspect the frozen creature. Clay, conversely, is incensed at being denied the opportunity to participate in the battle, and Shiro offers a hesitant apology, explaining that a conventional fire wolf have resulted in the monster being covered in mud and gore, potentially spoiling its consumable sections. Clay is taken aback upon realizing Shiro's intention to consume a monster, but then his anger shifts to another matter as he reminds Shiro that his role is Shiro's bodyguard, and if Shiro insists on fighting monsters independently, Clay's presence becomes redundant. Shiro experiences a pang of guilt, but responds by stating his greater familiarity with battling such creatures. Clay considers this point, but reiterates that in these circumstances, a collaborative team effort is essential to overcome adversaries. He requests Shiro to place more trust in both him and Fang. Shiro and Bai, flustered, apologize for their oversight. Clay reassures them with a pang, indicating it as fine. And then determines that their immediate priority should be transporting the crab out of the cave. Following this task, Shiro and the others proceed to extract the eldritch crystals found in the vicinity. However, he informs the dwarf Gwen that his instruments are still detecting activity from the cave as lower levels, proposing that we investigate further. In hopes of discovering an even greater quantity of eldritch, the dwarf, Zambo, begins to weep with joy. Overwhelmed that Shiro has uncovered a new mineral vein for them. Witnessing Zambo's reaction, Shiro speculates that perhaps the peculiar transformations occurring across the continent made by a consequence of his encounter with B.S. Father. Reason says that his involvement in that event irrevocably altered the trajectory of history, and he now comprehends the cup of God's true intentions in sending him to this realm. As his companions begin their return journey, Shiro recognizes that his self-serving choices have already begun to reshape the world, and he fervently hopes these alterations prove beneficial. Shortly thereafter, everyone arrives back at the castle, where Shiro informs the king that their investigation concluded without incident, and they successfully neutralized the most significant threat present. The king is pleased with his news but still seeks official corroboration from Zambu. Who enthusiastically returns to the king the precious moment Shiro vanquished the crab monster. Zambu then asks Shiro to present the creature to the monarchs, a request Shiro agrees to fulfill. He unseals his magical satchel, from which the frozen crab emerges. The sheer mass of the beast causes the entire throne room to reverberate, and the king is utterly incredulous. He approaches to fully appreciate the monster's immense scale, subsequently proclaiming Shiro as courageous deed deserving of recompense. Shiro promptly requests the monster itself as his reward, a demand that utterly astounds the king, who perceives no inherent value in such an item. Shortly thereafter, Shiro and his companions venture into the city. Vel expresses delight over the substantial sum of money they retrieved from the king, but Shiro, conversely, shows complete indifference to AD, as he is preoccupied with envisioning various culinary methods for preparing the crab. Clay finds it somewhat unsettling that both Shiro and they tend to act irrationally at unpredictable times. Shiro, however, assures him that the crab will prove to be far more valuable than Clay currently imagines. The following day, Val is presented with a Pegasus by the king, who had learned of her desire for such a creature. Val is overjoyed at the sight of the winged steed, while concurrently, Zambu hands Clay his mended spear. Val mounts the Pegasus, informing Shiro that it is intended for her sister, and thus she will depart for home at once. She confessed to him that she is deeply indebted to him, and that even a lifetime of effort might not suffice to repay her duty. Shiro responds that the matter is already settled, as she acquired a crab in return. Their carriage pulls up, and Shiro bids farewell to Val. She assures him of a future reunion before soaring away. Several days subsequently, Shiro and Clay arrive in their city, where Bunny Girl senpai greets them. She expresses surprise at their joint return and inquires if they have formed a partnership. Shiro claims Clay merely accompanied him, but the lizard man interjects, asserting that they have, in fact, established a tie. Arya reacts with considerable excitement to this news, and she promptly rushes out to notify the guild master, while Shiro chases our guns at Clay. Clay explains that he has chosen to continue accompanying Shiro for an extended period, because he recognizes that Shiro is no mere ordinary human, and a level-headed individual is required to supervise him, especially since Shiro remains somewhat hesitant about forming a team with Clay, but B is already enthusiastic about the prospect and begins to circle him. After some contemplation, Shiro also determined that journeying alongside Clay would not be disadvantageous. They then settle down to deliberate on their team as destination. Following Clay's proposal, they opt to name themselves the Azure Black Brigade and formally register as a team. Subsequently, Shiro proceeds to the blacksmith's workshop, bringing the eldritch crystals. As Rebel and her master scrutinize the crystal, Shiro inquires if its quality is sufficient for crafting the desired sword. The two blacksmiths suddenly begin to vibrate uncontrollably, akin to an old mobile phone, causing Shiro to become alarmed. Fearing that eldritch of such high purity make them more challenging to forge. Nevertheless, the two blacksmiths abruptly erupt into shouts and tears, because they have never before encountered crystals of such exceptional purity. The master blacksmith declares that in his 120 years of practice, he has never witnessed such a quantity at a single time. FNB begins to weep, eager to participate. Shiro is pleasantly appreciated the crystals he brought. However, Rebel explains they cannot adequately compensate him for the eldritch items. He reiterates his original request, a bespoke pair of scissors. Nevertheless, he is prepared to defer that for a period as he fears desires Rebel and her master to forge a sword capable of winning the upcoming tournament. A fortnight later, while Shiro enjoys a meal and drinks at an inn, the Fury arrives with a letter from a nobleman demanding his immediate presence. Shiro, disinclined to engage with nobility, feigns a sudden kidney ailment. Clay, however, tells him to chase his treacheries, and even the Fury reassures him that Lord Belmont is not an unpleasant individual. Shiro then opens the letter, finding it addressed to both him and Clay, recognizing their partnership. Lord Belmont speaks of bestowing honors upon them. Shiro finds this suspicious, wondering what the noble expects in return. But Clay understands that the nobleman merely wishes to sell the infant dragon. Shiro becomes anxious, hugging Bay and asking if Belmont intends to abduct him. However, both Clay and the Fury are convinced Belmont would not do such action, and moreover, lacks the authority. Soon after, Shiro and Clay are conveyed to the Lord's estate in a luxurious carriage. Everyone in the city stares, prompting Shiro to question their intense interest. Clay responds that an invitation to a noble's mansion is every adventurer's dream, has a noble's patronage, guarantees lifelong security. They soon arrive at the Lord's residence, and Shiro is utterly astounded by the sheer opulence. The chariot halted before the Lord's castle, and a butler emerges to escort them inside, a theme of medieval chime, making Shiro quite happy, as she had always wished to be great by Maida. Just then, an arrogant, impudent atrocious young, heading directly for Shiro and Day. She asks if this is the baby dragon, then comments that she expected it to appear more intelligent. She abruptly points at Bay, and declares the baby dragon now belongs to her. Shiro and Bay are startled by this behavior behind him. Shiro tells the spoiled girl she is being unreasonable. She retorts that dragons are noble creatures, and only someone of her noble standing can rise on. Shiro quickly realizes the girl is impervious to logic, so he scans her status, discovering her name is Tiris. She is Lord Belmont's 14-year-old daughter. He ponders how to handle this obstinate idiom. Then decides on a gentle approach. He kneels before Tiris and asks her why she believes she is entitled to the dragon. The girl nervously explains that her butler informed her of an adventurer with a dragon, so she naturally desired it. She adds that the butler also advised her to act dignified and stand firm when dealing with stupid adventurers. Shiro is now furious with the butler, but then he tells Tiris THTB is his family, and she should not attempt to take him away. The girl is shocked to hear this, and Bay's response further amazes her. Because she had never thought the dragon infant was intelligent enough to comprehend human speech. She suddenly begins to cry, apologizing to Shiro for her rude remarks. Unaware of their bond, Bay flies over to comfort her. Tiris becomes so delighted that she embraces him. Bay immediately rushes back to Shiro, who asks the girl why she so desperately wanted a dragon. Tiris replies she wished to show it to her mother. Just then, her father arrives, leaving Shiro utterly bewildered. By his youthful and handsome appearance, ye cannot believe this is the noble who summoned him. The man introduces himself as Lord Belminan and greets Shiro, stating he has heard much about him. They then sit for that, and Belmont first apologizes for his daughter's conduct. Clay immediately gets down to business, asking why he has summoned him. Belmont replies it concerns his wife. Clay is shocked by this and explains to Shiro that Belmont's wife has been bedridden for an extended period. The noble confirms, mentioning a recent rumor about Shiro restoring a weak and sick man to health in a single day, and they shocked Shiro as helping treating his wife. Shiro considers this, feeling he must exercise extreme caution in treating the woman, as his magic was potent enough to cause Clay's evolution. Belmont then informs him that Tirish desires a dragon for her mother. Believing a cute companion would improve her health, Clay starts trembling, struggling to suppress his terror. Upon hearing this, INDB cannot even do that, saying them so emotional sway Shiro into agreeing. Toga still wishes to avoid a risk. However, after some thought, he resolves to save the woman as live and accepts the request. Belminan leads everyone to his wife's room, where Shiro finds incredibly dusty. Belminan's wife appears extremely pale, her bones visibly protruding through her skin. Shiro is appalled to see her and asks the noble if the room can be brightened. Before commencing treatment, he learns the woman is allergic to sunlight, so he decides to scan her in the day. He discovers her body harbors no diseases. To keep an entire hospital bus treating her, he tells Belmont he can manage most of her symptoms, but there is a condition called liver poisoning that he knows nothing about. He remains silent, considering his options, then asks the noble if he trusts an unknown adventurer with his wife as life. The woman has already abandoned hope of recovery, wishing only to embrace her daughter one last time. So, Belminan decides to take a leap of faith and implores Shiro to save his wife. As Belminan carefully prays for his wife as life, Shiro accepts his request. Clay asks Shiro if he intends to use the same method to heal the frail lady, but he refuses. The method he used earlier consumes a great deal of mana to heal the body, but Mul currently lacks that vitality and will likely perish if he used that method on her. He decides to treat her symptoms first, starting with her weak eyes, which are pained by even a little sunlight entering the room. He casts a healing spell on her eyes, ensuring he doesn't use too much mana at once, because that would also harm her. After a period of healing her eyes, Shiro asks Mul to open them. She gently opens her eyes, and to her utter delight, her vision is significantly improved. She is already happy with this result, but Shiro has more to offer. He retrieves his staff from his bag, and then uses a spell to instantly revitalize the entire room. The powerful magic expels all dirt from the room and simultaneously opens the windows. As sunlight floods the room, Belmont asks his wife if she is swim. She begins to weep, declaring that the sunlight no longer pains her eyes. While the two of them thoroughly celebrate this joyous occasion, Shiro notices a bootleg and some maid staring at them from behind. He senses something peculiar about the butler, and tells Belminan that they should go somewhere else to talk. Once they reach Belminan's study, Shiro reveals that Mul is suffering from something called liver poisoning. Belminan immediately realizes someone is deliberately poisoning her, but something else worries him even more. Shiro tells him that because he doesn't know the details about liver poison, he cannot fully cure Mel. He then asks Belminan, in response to a query about an antidote. The nobleman expresses despair, explaining that liver poison is an ancient, untreatable toxin. He adds that its formula and cure were believed to be forgotten. Shiro counters that if the poison can still be produced, then the necessary knowledge must persist. He proposes the attempt to reverse engineer the poison to develop an antidote. Clay interjects noting their lack of information regarding its components. Clay mentions they are unaware of the poison as constituent elements. At that moment, Belmont offers a solution, disclosing that his forefathers collected significant historical documents as a pastime. These archives, he believes, could hold the crucial data they require. However, he cautions that the majority of these texts are inscribed in an archaic tongue, incomprehensible to modern readers. Fortunately, this linguistic barrier poses no challenge for Shiro, whose unique translation ability allows him to convert the ancient script into Japanese. Despite this, he remains uncertain which specific volumes will prove useful. Consequently, he refines his inquiry using poison-related keywords and uncovers a single book detailing the Ever plant. Shiro perceives something peculiar about this discovery. The information is presented as a diary entry penned by an individual named Pola, who self-identifies as the most adorable adventurer. Shiro opts to fully immerse himself in this persona. As he processes the journal, he adopts the mannerism of an embarrassingly delusional adolescent. The diary recounts Paula's discovery of a massive rock resembling a winged horse, situated beside an expansive lake. Adjacent to this formation, shimmering golden blossoms were observed. Clay swiftly silences Shiro, preventing him from further indulging in his embarrassing antics. He then informs Belmont that he recognizes the site described in the diary. Producing a map, Clay indicates a lake beyond Belmonte's domain, notable for its Pegasus statue. Clay suggests the Everflower might be from there, but laments that the location is a 5-day journey by carriage. Shiro declares their immediate departure. Belmonte promptly begins preparations for their journey, while his scholarly butler observes them and dispatches a carrier pigeon during the interim. Shiro affixes a magical barrier stone outside Neville's chambers, explaining to Belmonte that it serves to safeguard his way from potential harm. At that precise moment, Tiris rushes in. She offers an apology to Shiro for her previous impoliteness. He acknowledges the severity of her remarks but grants forgiveness, commending her for independently recognizing her misstep. He instructs her to cultivate the crucial ability of acknowledging her error, emphasizing that this will foster her personal development. He also urges her to proceed thoughtfully. He advises her to deliberate carefully rather than hastily drawing conclusions. Tiris pledges to follow this advice. Shiro then cautions her about potential issues on he departs. He warns that individuals may attempt to sway her opinion against him by labeling him a villain or a swindler. He instructs her to report such instances to her father, rather than accepting these claims at face value. This approach, he explained, will have avert any undesirable occurrences. Following this, Shiro and Clay mount their unicorn and hasten towards their objective. Shiro employs spells to manipulate the weight of all present, causing the horses to gallop significantly faster than anticipated. They swiftly arrive at the site, which proves to be a profoundly dull for Shiro. Clay informs him that on his previous visit, this area was home to a thriving village. However, conditions appear to have deteriorated abruptly. Shiro expresses concern that the lake might have desiccated due to the drought, but Clay reassures him that its immense size prevents complete evaporation. Nevertheless, the lake itself presents an even more dire state than its environment, with its waters appearing contaminated. Furthermore, the chest trees are submerged within the lake. Shiro investigates the water body and ascertains that it has been poisoned with a toxin derived from the horns of a Garanuk buffalo monster. Shiro conveys to Clay his suspicion that the lake was intentionally contaminated. Before he can elaborate, the local villagers make their appearance. They stand prepared to repel the perceived intruder. Shiro, observing the frightened villagers, advances towards them with the intention of resolving the situation amicably. He explains that they are adventurers on a mission to collect rare resources, a claim the villagers initially found hard to accept. However, when Clay displays his armband, their skepticism dissipates. The villagers promptly lowered their weapons. Shiro inquired if they can provide further details about the events that transpired, but at that moment, one man collapses due to extreme weakness. Shiro observes the man as remarkably light physique and instantly surmises that the villagers are suffering from severe food scarcity. The villagers then lead him to their settlement. The village itself is in disarray, devastated by the prolonged drought. They recount to Shiro that 10 months prior, the lake abruptly became contaminated, resulting in the death of all fish, and the groundwater also became too polluted for consumption. With the populace in a dire predicament, a merchant named Inyasi appeared in the village at that critical juncture, proposing to rescue them. His prize was the golden flower that flourished by the lake, the whereabouts of which had been a closely guarded secret of their community for generations. Though he referred as a divine blossom, their desperate circumstances compelled him to consent to providing us with one flower monthly in return for 60 barrels of water. This quantity of which for drinking would prove inadequate for their crop, explaining why the villagers had endured prolonged starvation. Shiro now comprehends their plight and suggests to the villager that Inyas appears to be a malevolent figure. They, however, are unwilling to accept his assessment. They argue that Inyas is their benefactor, but Shiro admonishes them to critically consider the suspicious timing of his appearance. Hazen discloses that the lake was intentionally contaminated. Shiro asserts that the perpetrator could be none other than Inyas, who now extorts a poisonous flower each month in exchange for water. Upon hearing this, the villagers' deeply held convictions begin to crumble. Shiro, however, is enraged and they vows to utterly defeat Inyas. He pledges to personally dismantle Inyas' wicked plots. Before doing so, he resolves to assist the famished villagers, instructing B to employ his spirit magic. The young dragon ascends above the clouds, utilizing its magic to conjure rain. After a brief downpour provides the villagers with water and renewed hope, Shiro signals B to chase. Subsequently, the provides an instantaneous cleansing for everyone, as they had not bathed in mountain. The villagers are astonished by this, but Shiro's efforts do not conclude there. He proceeds to mend their dwelling using his magical abilities. Next, he retrieves his colossal whoop and prepares a delectable stew for the entire community, once everyone has eaten their fill. The village chief expresses gratitude to Shiro, inquiring how they may ever compensate him. Shiro responds that simply allowing him to gather the above flower would suffice. He explains his urgent need to concoct an antidote. The village chief readily agrees, but as he ponders, children approach me, inviting Shiro to play. The chief attempts to send the children away, citing their current preoccupation, but Shiro interjects, stating it as perfectly acceptable, as he appreciates witnessing healthy and spirited children. He accompanies the children to their clandestine hideout, which functions as a storage facility for collecting the latest fruits that grow in the vicinity. The leader of the children's group, elucidates that only the nectar from the flowers possesses a sweet taste, while the fruits themselves are exceedingly salty, leading them to discard them. Shiro attempts to utilize his abilities to discern any information. No data appears regarding the fruit. However, he noticed a familiar-looking brown liquid sipping from the fruits, and upon tasting it, he recalls the distinct flavor of soy sauce. This was a taste he had longed for. Concurrently, within Belmonte's mansion, Tirish hurries to her mother's chamber, alerted by the sound of an alarm. Prior to his departure from the estate, Shiro had set up a unique magical alarm in the room, designed to activate if anyone with malicious intent attempted to enter. Tirish, curious about the identity of the person in the room, discovers the suspicious butler Bernard upon entering. His presence frightens her. She demands he keep his distance. Bernard inquires about her distress, to which she retorts by asking if he is attempting to harm her mother. Bernard, unperturbed, asks, Gue such as told World Cross Hermin. She discloses that Shiro installed an alarm designated to identify malicious intent, prompting the butler to begin ridiculing Shiro. He asserted that adventurers are ill-mannered, avaricious individuals whom Tyria should not trust. He suggested Shiro is solely motivated by financial gain, installing elaborate yet ineffective security system to defraud her father. Tirish vehemently rejects any negative claims about Shiro, but Bernard then questions her whether she would place her trust in an unknown adventurer or a butler who has faithfully served her family for many years. The young girl begins to panic upon hearing this. Fortunately, Belmont arrives precisely at that moment. Tiris hurries to him, stating she has crucial information to share. Belmont listens to the accounts of both thieves. And Bernard in his private office. He concurs with the butler as suspicion that Shiro could be attempting to defraud him. Nevertheless, it remains undeniable that Shiro developed a superior new system, and its alarm indicates Bernard possesses a threat to him. Consequently, Belmont resolves to verify the situation. The head butler then brings a pitcher of water into the room. At that precise moment, Bernard visibly panics upon saying it. Belmont pours him a glass, remarking that he lacks a definitive method to ascertain the true antagonist. Therefore, he will begin by requiring Bernard to demonstrate his blamelessness. He instructs Bernard to consume the special water he habitually carries, asserting it will accelerate Mul's recuperation. The butler becomes visibly agitated at this. Belmont then splashes the water onto Bernard's face, causing him to shriek hysterically, declaring the water to be tainted. However, it is revealed that Belmont merely played a trick on him. He proceeds to drink the water himself, confirming it is merely ordinary tap water, and the poison Bernard had been administering to Mule has already been confiscated. Belmont subsequently commands his guardian to apprehend the culprit. Following this, the head butler presents him with a letter discovered in Bernard's quarters. Belmont is immediately taken aback, as the letter is composed in a coded language, leading him to conclude that the mastermind behind it is exceptionally clever. Concurrently, the merchant now travels to the village and starts knocking on the chief's residence. When a villager emerges to investigate the commotion, he is astonished to encounter the merchant. Nash asserts he has arrived to collect the flower ahead of scheduled this time. The villager initially informs him that the chief is accompanying some adventurers on an excursion, but then remembers the flower is toxic nature. He informs Nash that she can no longer permit him to possess it. It becomes apparent that the merchant had anticipated this refusal. He promptly summons his henchmen, instructing them to conclude matters swiftly. In the interim, the village chief guides Shiro and Clyde through a hidden cover, leading him to the house, where the golden Iber flower flourished beside a Pegasus statue. However, this marks the conclusion of the video. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next installment.